The main fix is here, time to break the chains. Your mind will melt, can't escape these flames. The main fix, groove and doom collide. Get your fix, ride the cosmic tide. Streams of power, darkness entwined. Tune in now, leave reality behind. The Blix Fix, groove and doom collide. Get your fix, ride the cosmic tide. Streams of power, darkness entwined. Tune in now, leave reality behind. The Blix Fix, groove and doom collide. Get your fix, ride the cosmic tide. No mercy, no light, only raw might. Prepare your soul for an endless night. Stone riffs pound, rhythm takes hold. Welcome to the abyss, let the tale unfold.
Me. Yay. Philly D time.
Are they traitorous grifters? Are they victims? Or are they
Yes.
just useful idiots? These are the questions people are now asking after an indictment was unsealed that alleges that some of the biggest right-wing influencers
Yes,
on
traitorous
this platform
grifters. Yes,
received
useful
millions
idiots.
of dollars to pump out videos to spread Russian propaganda ahead of the 2024 election. We're going to be talking about that and so much more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show. You daily dive into the news, so let's just jump into it.
This is a news show.
So the Russian government has allegedly gotten millions of dollars to some of the biggest right-wing influencers in the world who just so happen to say things like,
This is psychotic. Ukraine is the enemy of this country. Ukraine is our enemy, being funded by the Democrats. I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation right now is Ukraine.
and so that is
Yeah. So he did a tweet like yesterday where he's like, Russia's bad, Putin sucks balls. And it's like, dude, you just spent fucking 4 or 5 years. I mean, you just spent the entire Trump presidency and the entire Biden presidency pro Russia. So this one tweet undoes that. Yeah, that's how the tiny Republican brain works.
Tim Pool. He's one of 6 big personalities at a time.
Dimful. Oh my God. They're cloning morons. And look at them. Look at the way they all try to. What the fuck? What is that? What's going on with the posing? Who are they looking at except for Tim? Tim's like looking at you. You just got a squeaky hamster wheel. Everybody else is like looking hornily, lustfully, and longingly at Trump pictures. They're all thinking about fapping to some Trump spank banks, especially this guy.
Tennessee-based company by the name of Tenet Media. But the biggest ones there, besides him, being the likes of Benny Johnson and Dave Rubin. And with this, I want to say, one, they, along with Tenet Media itself, are alleged to be just one key part of a massive Russian influence campaign targeting unwitting Americans all over the country. And two, to be clear, neither Tenet Media
And this is the thing. They're all claiming to be the victims. Like, oh, we didn't know. We had no idea. Okay, you're getting like $100,000 a week, but you have no idea where it's coming from. You just take the money. These are the people who are always talking about how, yes, MAGA is so much smarter than everyone else. We do our research. Why don't you do your research? You are fake news. These people are now saying, yeah, I was taking $100,000 a week from these people, but I had no idea it was coming from Russia. And the fact that during this entire period, I was like daily spewing pro-Russia propaganda, like every single fucking day I was spewing pro-Russia propaganda. Like, yeah, that's just a coincidence. And we all know most coincidences take lots of careful planning. But yeah, just a coincidence. Just happened to be spitting all this pro-Russia stuff, and while taking money from Russia that I didn't know was from Russia.
or anyone at the company is actually being accused of wrongdoing. And I'm not saying Tim Pool was ordered to say those things about Ukraine. Part of this alleged Russian scheme could just be Russian operatives seeing creators saying things that they love, like pro-Russian talking points, and going, let's make sure these guys don't have to worry about cash. Which, funny enough, is a tactic that Tim Pool himself talked about in the past, though through a slightly different
And that's the thing. I mean, that is definitely going to be, because I mean, look into Jimmy Dore too. Because that's the thing with these right-wing dorks. They make themselves easy targets with their contrarianism. So whether they were doing it knowingly and intentionally is questionable, because it's very likely their contrarianism just made them easy targets. Russia was like, well, they're already saying everything we would ever pay them to say. So let's just go ahead and just start paying them to keep saying it. I mean, that's especially most likely with Dim Fool.
So what happens with social media, particularly YouTube, where it's really easy, you can have a foreign agent or even the government or some corporation or whatever say, this guy talks about things that we really like. Dump ad money into his channel through Google AdSense, and they'll never know we were the ones funding him, and you can't prove it.
Because all of this actually has to do with the DOJ charging 2 employees of the Russian state-controlled media network RT with conspiracy to violate the Foreign Agents Registration Act. And they're accused of secretly paying $10 million to a company in Tennessee that's now widely understood to be Tenet Media to spread nearly 2,000 English-language videos on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and X. With one unidentified influencer, for example, reportedly getting paid $400,000 a month, with that coming after a $100,000 signing bonus.
Probably Benny Johnson. I would say most likely that would be Benny Johnson because of his status in the Trump administration.
So, with all this, you had AG Merrick Garland saying, the subject matter and content of many of the videos were often consistent with Russia's interest in amplifying U.S. domestic divisions in order to weaken U.S. opposition to core Russian interests, particularly its ongoing war in Ukraine. Right, and one of the examples provided is that the Tennessee company was reportedly told to blame Ukraine for an attack on a concert venue in Moscow back in March, even though ISIS had already claimed responsibility. With then the company's founder allegedly replying by saying one of the contributors would be happy to cover. And there, like I said, Tenet Media isn't actually named in the indictment or being accused of anything right now. But But the company's co-founders, right-wing influencer Lauren Chen and her husband, Liam Donovan, allegedly knew the money came from Russia. And actually, with that, we're now
Of
seeing that
course.
Chen's contract with the conservative media company Blaze has been terminated in light of the allegations. But also, very notably, it's not clear that anyone besides her
course.
and Donovan were aware of what was going on at Tenet. Right? And you also have the indictment alleging that at least 2 contributors were misled about the true source of the site's funding. Right? And so
Oh.
with all that, you had Poole, along with Johnson and Rubin, issuing statements on social media saying that they were
Oh.
victims and they hadn't done anything wrong.
They lied about everything else in their lives, but they're telling the truth about this, guys.
With Poole, for example, saying, should these allegations prove true, I, as well as the other personalities and commentators, were deceived and
No.
are victims. That being
No, you're not. No, you're not. No, you're not. No, you're not. And I'm going to explain why and how that is. No, you're not victims. Because, as I said before, even if, let's just go ahead and assume it's true that they had, for whatever reason, crazy reason, they had zero idea, zero knowledge. There was like, nope, no clue that this was in any way connected to Russia. Let's just assume that's true. Let's give them that one as a freebie. Okay? They still knowingly, deliberately put time and energy into crafting themselves and their shows into the kind of thing that Russia would want to fund and support. So even if they did not know the money was coming from Russia, they were still engaged in the activity that attracted Russia. So no, you're not victims.
being said, we still do not know what is true, as these are only allegations. And finally, adding, Putin is a scumbag, Russia sucks donkey balls. Also, seemingly regarding his past comments on Ukraine, he appeared to sarcastically write, upon reflection, I now understand that Ukraine is our greatest ally. As the breadbasket of Europe and a peace-loving people, we can
See, that's why you can't ever take Tim Pool seriously, because he'll never do the right thing. He'll never say the right thing because he's a contrarian, and it just shows that I mean, if I wanted to live a comfortable life, all I would have to do is, at any point in time, I could have just completely shut off all of my morality and just gotten rid of my conscience and just done what Tim Pool does. Just like suck Republican dick at every opportunity, like say the most ridiculous things all the time. Just, you know, doesn't matter how. I mean, just look at Alex Jones. Just look at Sean Hannity. Just look at all of Fox News. Just look at all of Daily Wire. On the right, you can say the most absurdly ridiculous shit, and it will only make you money. The more ridiculous your shit is, the more money you will make. Like, you could say something that is just blatantly stupid and have someone, an accredited intellectual, point out that what you said was wrong and stupid. And then all you have to do is reply, oh yeah, you're the real dummy, ha ha ha, LOL, laughing emoji. And you just made $10 million more that week as a right-winger, being applauded for that being your reply. It's wild.
cannot allow the fascist Russians to continue their crimes against humanity. We must redouble our efforts and provide an additional $200 billion at once. But really, your opinion on Tim Pool or any of these other creators aside, right? The focus of this story is on Ukraine. That is a key thing. Because this Tenet media thing, it is just one small piece of the puzzle. In fact, reportedly, this whole Russian influence campaign has been codenamed Doppelganger. And according to the DOJ, it's run by Sergei Kiryenko, a former prime minister who's now Putin's first deputy chief of staff. And with that, the department actually published a document produced for a Russian company by the name of the Social Design Agency, detailing something called the Good Old USA Project. And there, the top objective was to, quote, increase the percentage of Americans who believe that the US has been doing way too much to support Ukraine. And with that, they were apparently targeting certain groups in particular, including residents of swing states and conservative states, US citizens of Hispanic descent, and American Jews. But then also, lastly, the, quote, community of American gamers, users of Reddit and image boards such as 4chan, and the documents describing this
God,
cohort as
yeah.
the, quote, backbone of
4chan
right-wing
is an
trends in the
easy
US segment
target
of
for
the internet. And then besides
anyone.
that, I should also say the document, along with the others obtained and released by the DOJ, explicitly talks about securing Russia's preferred outcome in the election. Because there, while the party and the candidate names are redacted in the versions we have, it's pretty clear from the context clues that this means Trump and the Republicans, which absolutely makes sense because it lines up with what we've heard from intelligence officials.
4chan is like MAGA, but like more immature, yet somehow more organized. It's filled with people who would suffocate themselves to spite you just because you said breathing is good. He says as he hits his bowl.
In the past, and just based on comments Trump has made in the past.
If we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want.
Though also there, I'll mention that there's a video going around today where Putin
Yeah, see,
claims
there
that
you
he
go.
wants Harris to win. But really, we've seen most serious people having the impression that that was just a joke. Because really, everything points to his real preference being Trump. And in any case, this comes as the Biden-Harris administration has announced a bunch of new measures to fight back against Russian efforts to influence this year's election. With the State Department, for example, designating 5 Russian state-funded news outlets, including RT, as foreign government missions. So with that, making it harder for employees of those outlets to get visas to the US. And then you have the DOJ seizing 32 internet domains that were reportedly used to spread Russian propaganda. There, notably, the websites being designed to look like authentic news sites, but they were actually fake. Also, the Treasury
I've seen
Department
a few.
announced news sanctions
reported
including
a
against RT's editor-in-chief and 9 other employees. So the department saying there that the editor-in-chief is a, quote, central...
Like, no joke. It was so weird. I ran across a website and it was masquerading as a legit news website. But like what it was is, I guess what gave me the advantage, what tipped me off, was the fact that it was one of those small town news sites that I'd been to before, that I was familiar with. That's why I was trusting the link. But then as soon as I got there, I just noticed something was a little off. And it was the language being used on some. I was like, are all these reposts from AP? Because the, what do you call it, the syntax or whatever was off. It's like the speech pattern was off. It wasn't right. It's like, this isn't proper Southern American English. And so that I just looked up at the address bar, and that's where I noticed, like, and once again, like, most of them are going to have like decently legit looking like web addresses, but this one, it struck me as funny because my first thought was, as much trouble as they put into making the site itself look legit, why is the web address .ru? I was like, I don't know. Is it because I'm using a VPN? I don't know. It's weird.
Figure in Russian government money and influence efforts. And of course, all of this is on top of other actions that we've seen recently. Like in March, for example, the Treasury imposed sanctions on the Social Design Agency and another Russian company accused of creating fake news sites to spread misinformation. Also, law enforcement has reportedly even been investigating Americans who have worked with Russia's state television networks in the past. With that actually leading to another indictment today of a guy who was an advisor to Trump's first campaign and who's now accused of money
Wow.
laundering and violating sanctions. But of course, you know, with all this, especially
They
when you're talking
can't-
about investigating Americans, there's a question about where the line is. Right? Some Americans, especially amongst Trump supporters, they see accusations that Russia is
Oh,
spreading
Lee Camp's gotta
disinformation
be
as
shitting.
efforts to undermine their views. And to that point, I mean, you just have to take a quick look online, especially
whatever
on
happened to
X.
him.
Right? You had Russiagate trending, and you had people, not even necessarily just Trump supporters, saying things like, just as in 2016 and 2020, Biden admin to activate Russiagate propaganda to manipulate U.S. opinion ahead of the 2024 election. Which, you know, I will say, this is kind of more of a general statement. No matter where you are on the political spectrum, it never hurts to be a little bit skeptical. But I also think it's important not to have such an open mind that your brain slips out. And often what I see is, for some reason, when
to completely disregard foreign interference is to completely shove your face up another man's ass crack.
when the topic of Russian interference pops up, some people will automatically try to make it sound like you're saying, oh, the election machines, those were tampered with by Russia. And what you're actually talking about are the bot and troll farms and the attempts to spread misinformation online, which has been seen and proven. Also, a big thing with this situation is you have people like Paul M. Barrett, the deputy director of the Stern Center for Business and Human Rights at NYU, arguing the government has to walk a fine line to distinguish between foreign election interference and free speech. And actually with that, you had him telling the New York Times, the dividing line is when you identify activity, particularly concealed activity that is circumventing established regulations for how we try to prevent foreign interference in our election. Right? And if that line is crossed, he says, it's not a reason to just run up the free speech flag and throw up your hands and we're helpless in the face of Vladimir Putin's very clever operatives. And you know, there, I should also say that Biden officials have made a point to say they are not aiming to curb free speech. Right? They've actually been saying that Americans won't be investigated just for repeating or spreading stories they see on Russian state media. And so far, we've seen no indication that that's untrue. Yeah, for now, that is where the situation is going to
Call
end, though
them a
obviously we're gonna
moron,
keep our
but-
eyes on it. And in the meantime, I gotta ask, what are your
Stop there.
thoughts
It's
on
free
any and
speech.
all of this?
Just
Whether it be
point out how
around
stupid
Tenet
they are.
Media and the influencers there specifically, or just the situation as a whole. But then, shifting gears to a very different topic, let's talk about why so many people are focused right now on Chapel Roan fighting scalpers. Because she has an upcoming show in Franklin, Tennessee in October, and she posted a video explaining, hey, tickets sold out incredibly fast, but not in a good way, in a very sketchy way. And that was because bots and scalpers took basically all the tickets. With that, obviously not ideal for anyone except maybe the
Clean
scalpers.
your-
So her team came up with a plan to get those tickets back to the fan.
Clean your windscreen, Phil.
So we went through and canceled all the scalper tickets we could. So from that, we're going to release a limited number of tickets to you because I want to make sure that tickets go to people who actually want to
Yeah,
come
exactly.
and like our fans.
And as far as how that's going to work, there's a site that fans can go to request up to 2 tickets. You just fill out a form with payment information and seat preference, and then a select number of fans will get assigned tickets. And learning by the end of the week if they're picked, and Chapel adding,
I know it's confusing and it's so annoying, but I genuinely am so pissed about the scalper situation and think that people actually deserve to get to my show. This is a larger issue. We're dealing with it.
and so with this, you have places like
Here's the thing. You can be mad.
Variety noting, you know,
You can be mad at her, which would be idiotic. It would be stupid as hell to be mad at her. Or you could be mad at the scalpers and the people who enable scalpers. It's like a discussion I had a long time ago. I made a whole room full of people mad. For pointing out a hard truth. Friend shows up to the room. We were all at our hangout spot. Friend shows up and he's complaining about so-and-so done ripped him off on some weed. Shorted him on a bag. And I said, how many times am I going to hear people complain about that before somebody does something? So then, like, another friend, oh yeah, what are we supposed to do? Drive over there and beat him up or something? Whatever. And I said no. And then I said, every single person in this room, other than me, has been ripped off by this person. I've never been ripped off by this person because I've heard all of you talk about getting ripped off so much that I've never gone to this person for anything because I wouldn't trust them and I won't trust them. But none of you can say the same. As a matter of fact, most of you have been ripped off multiple times by this person. And you keep coming back and you never say anything and you still hang out with them and you're still all buddy-buddy with them because it's part of this high school clique mentality. You guys think you're still back in the high school lunchroom. And I said, or something to that effect. Anyway, paraphrasing, of course, not like I memorize my flowery speeches. But then I said, now the thing that you do is you band together and show some solidarity and start calling him out. Just start straight up saying, dude, you've ripped everybody here off. We ain't dealing with you anymore until you start making shit right. I said, where are they going to make their money if nobody's giving them any money? It's that fucking simple. And if somebody in the market hears that there's a void to fill, they will gladly line up to take that money. There's always somebody willing to take on that new money. You just got to have the courage of conviction to wait for it, start putting the feelers out. Hey, this group of friends is looking for a new shop to give our money to. Everybody got mad at me instead of mad at the dude that kept ripping them off.
You know, this is not a new problem. Race scalpers are a very big problem at basically every concert on the face of the earth, but there's not a ton of precedent for artists actually finding and canceling those tickets. So there is some, right? Eric Church has done it, The Cure has as well. Oasis warned that it planned to do it for its tour, with them actually having a sale that was so messy it's now under investigation in the UK. But really, other than that, it's not too common. You know, Taylor Swift did a similar fan request ticket system after the Eras tour sale was botched. Though there, it was never really clarified if those seats were from canceled scalper seats. But for now, we'll have to wait to see how this plays out for Chapel Roan, and maybe this becomes the norm. Or what we may see are scalpers finding just another way around this as well, which personally is what I have my money on. And if not now, it's just a matter of time. And then, you know, we all have changes that we should / need to make, but in order for them to take, most of us need to ease into it. You know, it can't be about as Taylor Swift was featured 5 times in a 29-second hype video for the opening of the NFL season, rather over allegations that their whole relationship is just one big giant hoax. With that allegation absolutely blowing up after alleged breakup documents went viral on Reddit and Twitter outlining Travis's media plan following their planned separation. And those documents were said to be photographed from a desk and said Full Scope Public Relations at the top, which is the company that represents Travis. With the set objective of this plan being to effectively manage and mitigate the fallout from the breakup between Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, ensuring Travis retains a positive public image, minimizes negative media portrayal, and continues to build his personal and professional brand. And it adding that key messaging would be emphasizing that the split was a mutual decision,
That
and
is
that they
so
respect each other and want
weird.
privacy during this time. Right? And this document
be
even had a
AI.
date saying the breakup would be announced September 28th. And that following that, Travis would do interviews with a ton of outlets like ESPN, Sports
No,
Illustrated,
everything's
Vanity
spelt
Fair,
right. So
GQ, and even
somebody-
local stations, even including plans for interview prep and training and sort of canned phrases Travis could use during those. And so those documents made people think not just
Somebody
that the
typed
two
up some
might break
wacky
up, but
shit.
that this whole thing was just bullshit. It was just a PR stunt to begin with. But big thing, those documents are apparently fake, and Travis's team might even lawyer up over it. With a spokesperson from Full Scope telling the Today Show, these documents are entirely false and fabricated and were not created, issued, or authorized by this agency. We have engaged our
Yes.
legal team to initiate proceedings against the individuals or entities responsible for the
Yes.
unlawful and injurious
Yes.
forgery of documents.
Yes.
So yeah, we'll have to see
Yes.
what
I
comes from
love
all
it.
this, but it's not
Loving these
surprising that there was this
lawsuits.
big freak out, or really that anything's happened. The amount of people that are so
I hope. Oh my God. I want to see Elon Musk sued into oblivion. J.K. Rowling sued into oblivion. Logan and Jake Paul sued into oblivion. Of course, they've all got too much money. It won't happen. Donald Trump getting the shit sued out of him by fucking Jack White. Jack White winning. Oh, that would feel so good. And then this, oh yeah.
Invested in this is it's just huge. It's just a matter of if the attention is going to be as big as, I guess, the honeymoon season of the announcement. But right now, there's an insane media frenzy speculating about whether or not Taylor's going to be at tonight's Chiefs game. Which, yes, in the DeFranco household, we will be watching. My wife for Taylor and Travis, and me because this is the first time Lamar Jackson's on my fantasy team. So sorry, Ravens fans, in advance if tonight does not go your way. It is 100% my fault. So yeah, you're welcome or sorry in advance. But then, switching to sad and serious news, we need to talk about updates to the tragic school shooting that happened in Georgia yesterday. First up, we saw the authorities releasing the identities of the 4 people murdered at Appalachia High School, with the 2 children being Mason Schermerhorn and Christian Angelo, both of whom were 14 years old. And the 2 educators who were killed were 39-year-old Richard Aspinwall and 53-year-old Christina Irami. And as far as the 9 people who were hospitalized with injuries, authorities said that 8 of them were students, 1 is a teacher, and thankfully, all are expected to survive. We also got more information about the shooter, who's been identified as a 14-year-old student at the high school, as we mentioned yesterday. And while the authorities have still not publicly stated a motive, we did learn that law enforcement officials investigated him last year in connection to online threats of a school shooting. Right? And more specifically, the FBI said that it had received several anonymous tips in May of 2023 about posts on a gaming site that contained photos of guns and warnings of a school shooting at an unidentified location and time. With the FBI telling reporters that it tracked the post to Jackson County, where sheriff's deputies then continued the investigation, which led them to the suspected shooter, who was 13 at the time. And so with that, Jackson County officials brought in the teen and his father for an interview, but the teen denied making the threats. And while his father told the authorities that they did have hunting guns in the house, he said that his son didn't have unsupervised access to the weapons. And so as a result, no charges were filed, and with the FBI saying that the investigators lacked probable cause to make an arrest or take any additional law enforcement action on the local, state, or federal levels. Also, in a separate statement, Jackson County Sheriff Janice Mangum said a thorough investigation was conducted, but the gaming site threats could not be substantiated, and adding, "My phone is blowing up with messages from people about social media postings about other possible incidents. To my knowledge, there is not a list indicating any of this." Now, with that said, the FBI did say that Jackson County authorities alerted local schools for continued monitoring of the subject, but according to the New York Times, it's unclear if Appalachia High School officials were among those notified by Jackson County officials, because the school is technically in the neighboring county. And also, super notably here, just this morning, we got some more details from the records of the investigation by the county sheriff's office, obtained by several outlets, with those records showing that Jackson County officials were specifically investigating posts in a Discord chat group where a user had threatened to shoot up a middle school. And the investigators were ultimately led to the suspected shooter because the Discord account that made those threats was associated with an email belonging to him. That report noting that the username for the account was written in Russian and translated to the last name of the Sandy Hook shooter. But then also with that, the 13-year-old and his father told the authorities that they didn't speak Russian. And while the shooter did say that he used to have a Discord account, he claimed that he had deleted it because he had been hacked repeatedly and was afraid someone would use his information for nefarious purposes. With him also telling the investigator that, quote, he would never say such a thing, even in a joking manner. Also significant here is the information we got from the teen's father about his access to guns, with him having told investigators that his son, quote, is allowed to use them when supervised, but does not have unfettered access to them. But it's also unclear how those weapons were being stored or how the teen was prevented from accessing them, with the investigator writing that they had, quote, urged the father to keep his firearms locked away. And then beyond all that, the Times also just reported this morning that while police were searching the shooter's room, they found evidence that he, quote, had an interest in mass shootings, per 2 law enforcement officials. While they didn't provide specifics about the nature of that evidence, they did say that he appeared to be particularly obsessed with the Parkland shooting. And then the final update I want to hit on is that while I was filming, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation officially announced that the shooter has been charged with 4 counts of felony murder. And so as of recording, that's pretty much everything we know, but of course, this is still a developing situation. So for now, we're gonna have to wait to see if more information comes, but I mean, as far as what happens next, the shooter is expected to make his first appearance in court tomorrow. And then AI made this guy millions of dollars, but now he's facing prison time for it. I'll explain, right? We're talking about a guy by the name of Michael Smith, who was just arrested and charged with 3 counts of wire fraud conspiracy, and money laundering conspiracy. And this because, according to prosecutors, Smith used AI to create fake music, uploaded that music to music streaming services, and then used bots to play that music billions of times. And in doing so, he made $10 million in fraudulent streaming royalty
that's
payments.
crazy.
And actually, according to the federal indictment, this scheme started all the way back in 2017. Right? First, Smith allegedly acquired thousands of email addresses online, and using those made thousands of bot.
I mean, wouldn't whatever Like, for example, if he used Suno, is that how it's pronounced? Suno? If he used like a site like that to create the music, then wouldn't they have the rights to the music?
accounts on the music streaming services. And at the scheme's peak, Smith allegedly had 10,000 active bot accounts and even hired co-conspirators to do the data entry part of creating these accounts. The indictment then went on to say that Smith created software that streamed the songs that he owned on loops from different computers to make it all look genuine, and that, along with a number of other methods to conceal his fraud. Though apparently his foray into the music world, it didn't start with the goal of fraud. Turns out, as a legitimate musician, Smith started by posting his own small catalog of songs onto music streaming platforms. But then, according to the indictment, when he realized he needed more content to make more money, he initially partnered with a music publicist. Also later, even trying to sell his services to other musicians, asking them to pay him to play their music or hand over a chunk of their royalties. But when both of those plans didn't work out, Smith allegedly turned to AI. With prosecutors saying that he partnered with an unnamed CEO of an AI music company and an unnamed music promoter in 2018 to create just an absurd number of bogus AI songs. I mean, we're talking thousands of which he uploaded every week to platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. And with that, one of the ways that he
I fully encourage AI songs like Random Animal Wieners, though. And I'm also totally down with songs where it's like, here's a band playing, you know, like like the what if this song was written by a band from the 50s? You know, stuff like that. I mean, because it's all done in jest. No one's making money off of it. I mean, like, if you're going to be a musician who's going to complain about it, then all I can say to you is, as a fellow musician, well, then do it yourself. Go out and start doing, like, I mean, YouTube is filled with channels of musicians who figured out, you know, it's time to kill your ego and stop with the fucking snobbery and buffoonery and tomfuckery. And like, okay, here's what if Typo Negative did this Madonna song, and then they play it and sing it in that style. Or like one that I saw the other day, it was that dude Puna, with the what is it, 12-second songs or whatever. But stop doing that. And now he's just like, what is it, Andrew Puna, something like that? But he's like Puna, Puna, and what's that? Mac Glocky. Like they got together and did Spice Girls. I wanna. Tell me what you want, what you really want. Oh, tell me what you want, what you really want. That song. I really want a zig zig zang. If you want to be my lover. Yeah. They did that in the style of System of a Down. You know, so it's like they know what's up. So you can do that, or you can sit back on your ass and play music only for yourself and complain about what somebody else is doing with AI, which makes no sense because they're not trying to make a career out of the AI. They're just doing like, hey guys, here's a funny idea I had. And it works.
allegedly avoided detection by the platforms was spreading out the streams over this massive number of songs.
I will argue, though, that we need to get AI to a place where it's not killing resources to use it. That is the argument I have against it. That is the valid argument against it, is the amount of fucking resources.
Streaming one too many times. And then even when he did catch somebody's attention, prosecutors said Smith just lied through his teeth to get out of it. Also, getting into the specifics of the numbers here, according to a financial breakdown from 2017, Smith allegedly calculated that he could stream his song 661,440 times each day, with that bringing in daily royalty payments of just over $3,000 and totaling over $1 million annually. But big thing, that was before he started using AI, right? By June of 2019, Smith was allegedly earning over $100,000 a month, with a portion going to his co-conspirators. And in an email email sent in February of this year, Smith reportedly bragged that he had reached 4 billion streams and $12 million in royalties since 2019. With U.S. Attorney Damian Williams saying in a statement, through his brazen fraud scheme, Smith stole millions in royalties that should have been paid to musicians, songwriters, and other rights holders whose songs were legitimately streamed. And adding, today, thanks to the work of the FBI and the career prosecutors of this office, it's time for Smith to face the music.
Wow.
These motherfuckers. You know that motherfucker laughed when he wrote that down. But bad pun aside, Smith is in very real trouble. He is facing decades in prison, with each of his charges carrying a maximum sentence of 20 years. And then, so y'all, I am a fan of Rocket Money, and one of the reasons I'm a huge fan is because they make my life easier. You know, I got an alert. Money.com/PDS. And then, with the election coming up, forget the polls. Look up to the sky and look at the stars. That is a real thing that people who are going to vote are doing right now, with seemingly an increasing number of people getting very invested what astrologers have to say about this election. And as wild as that may all sound, I mean, this is actually far from the first time astrology and politics have intersected. I mean, if you actually look into it, a lot of historical world leaders have relied on astrology, right? I mean, this phenomenon, it didn't fall out of a coconut tree. It exists in the context. And right now, a lot of readings about the election are going viral because, as chaotic as this cycle has already been, some astrologers actually predicted how it would go down. Not only calling that Biden would jump out of the race, but getting some of it down to the exact date he'd do so. And I mean, some of these predictions, they go as far back as 2020. And in the weeks before Biden even stepped out, some started looking at Kamala and saying,
if you put Biden up against Trump, Trump's activations astrologically look a lot better. However, because Biden's looks so weird, it's like it doesn't even look like someone who's doing anything major, really. It looks like somebody who is staying home, essentially. So looking at his chart, I was like, okay, is he even the nominee?
I then almost feel like Biden somehow does come into presidency in some way. And mostly I feel that way because I feel like we might end up with Kamala Harris as our actual president.
Kamala.
Again, this is a hot take. I actually really don't follow politics closely. So this is just based on astrology, honestly.
Right, not every video got everything 100%, but a lot was pretty on the money. You know, astrology is something you either buy into or you don't. Just to be clear, I personally do not. But the point here isn't to sell you on it or sell you against or tell you what's bound to happen in November. Instead, what's really interesting is why so many people are looking at it right now and how it's being used for potential answers during a time of political uncertainty. So with this, we actually talked to astrologist Catherine Urban, who not only made accurate predictions about this election so far, but had very interesting insights as to why people have become so invested.
I think people have always looked to astrology to help answer questions that are unknown. People have always consulted the stars as well as other forms of divination to gain clarity on the future, especially when there's a lot at stake, like there seems to be with this election.
We're saying usually she talks to people who want answers about personal issues like their marriage, their career, or their health. You know, right now, the line between personal and political, it is super, super thin.
I guess maybe that's one of the reasons why we're seeing it more and more mainstream around this election is because the outcome of this election does become personal for a lot of people, you know, as far as the decisions people are able to make about their bodies, for example, you know, that being like a high ticket issue, people do feel that the outcome of this election will impact them personally. And so I think more people are invested in knowing what's going to happen.
And astrology generally is becoming more and more popular, especially among young people. With, for example, a survey from YouGov in 2022 finding that 27% of Americans, including 37% of adults under 30, say they believe in astrology or the general idea that the stars and planets influence our lives. And in fact, as many as 70 million Americans reportedly check their horoscopes every day. But I mean, this election in particular, it is so crazy. It is people turning to literally anything for guidance. I mean, there is a woman, and prepare yourselves to hear this sentence, who predicts the future by looking at asparagus. Yes, the vegetable asparagus. She is called the Asparamancer, and at the start of the year, she said that the U.S. would get its first female president this year, though she later indicated she didn't think it would be Kamala. As far as why people are turning to divination specifically to seek out these answers, Catherine says it's twofold. Right? People have a natural longing to find something bigger than themselves. It's why a lot of people turn to religion, but for those who want something non-denominational or more open-minded for themselves. Astrology can fit that bill. And this is we see the stars and the moon every night, which makes them easy to relate to. But she also added that lately it feels like there's a lot to make sense of.
We live in an information age, and this is
Yeah.
kind of a newer development for
We
human
do.
beings. Our nervous systems are not used to taking in this much information. Historically, human beings are wired to know what's going on locally
Yeah.
and maybe a little bit nationally. We're plugged in all the time. And so there are more things to be anxious about generally. And so I'm not so sure that we necessarily live in times that are more stressful than our ancestors. It's just that there's a deeper awareness of more ongoings. So there is more that we are forced to care about.
You know, like I said earlier, some of the most powerful people in the world have been certified astrology girlies. I mean, even Ronald Reagan, he and Nancy were known to frequently refer to an astrologist while in the White House, specifically turning to the field after the assassination attempt against him. While they downplayed it as a hobby, many others have shot back at that. With, for example, Reagan's former chief of staff once writing in a memoir, virtually every major move and decision the Reagans made during my time as White House chief of staff was cleared in advance with a woman in San Francisco who drew up horoscopes to make certain that the planets were in favorable alignment for the enterprise. And that woman was Joan Quigley. And she said that she worked in the White House for 7 years and was responsible for timing press conferences, speeches, when Air Force One would fly, and even when debates would happen. Many reports also claim that J.P. Morgan, right, the actual human person, not the bank, was also into astrology. And he is often credited with saying that millionaires don't need astrologers, but billionaires do. And as for why powerful people have often turned to astrology, Catherine said that, like everyday people, it all has to do with feelings of uncertainty and a need for answers.
Historically, a lot of world leaders have used astrologers because, you know, there's a lot at stake for that kind of role. And to try to anticipate what might happen as far as world events and things that might impact a nation.
And in fact, those stakes actually kind of brought on the first forms of astrology ages and ages ago, right? I mean, it was initially used to look at more of a collective.
It was used by kings and rulers in order to understand what's going to be impacting our kingdom as far as things like droughts or famines or pandemics and things like that.
Then fast forward to today, and it's not just about
A lot of that
personal
ended
life
up
or politics
becoming
or
a farmer's
global crises.
almanac.
Some people use astrology to predict what's going to happen with the stock market, which I know may not be the finance bro crossover you expected, but you know, it's happening. But as far as November goes, you have Catherine saying, you know, it's not like astrologers look into crystal balls or have that so Raven-esque visions, right? Though when it comes to the election and even just to how we got here, she did say,
for many years, many of my colleagues, as well as myself, have been anticipating the rise of Kamala Harris, as well as issues with Biden's health. I started paying closer attention to Kamala Harris's chart when she became elected the vice president. And that's when I was like, ooh, watch out.
With all that said, you know, I'll say a different version of what I always say. Ignore the polls, ignore astrology, and make sure you just Virgo to the polls. Don't boo me. You can't shame a man that's embraced his cringe. But that aside, any and all thoughts you have regarding astrology, tarot, anything, I'd love to hear from you, and maybe even you with your experiences in those comments. Code PDS newsletter, doubling entries and winnings. But then with that said, of course, let's talk about yesterday with some commentary. And there, we definitely saw a lot of comments around that HOA deep dive. Where some like Steven saying, wait, so you're telling me that effectively privatizing information.
I mean, I can't believe I just sat and let all that stuff about the shooter just whoop. It just hits. But no, I mean, okay, here's a big thing. This is something that really needs to be mentioned to every amosexual, all of these gun nuts, all these right wingers. It needs to be said over and over to them. Like, we have these young people, young men, specifically young boys, who check all of the boxes all of the boxes that right wingers, that these gun nuts say will prevent this kind of violence and these shootings. Well, if you do this and you do this and you do this and you do this. So we have these young people who check all these boxes. And they're the ones doing the shootings. Explain.
Infrastructure by giving it to an HOA instead of leaving it to the city isn't working out? Insert shocked face here. Morgan saying the fact that the idea of an HOA even exists in the modern world is insane. And adding even more insane is that the amount of houses that stuck under an HOA has increased. It's maddening. And while that was a very popular comment, you also had some pushing back, like Chris, who said, it is not insane, it's practical. My dad's house was next to a junkyard crack den house, and it really screwed him over in selling his house. Everyone saw the neighbors coming down the road, and that was all it took for them to bail. We also had Insanity sharing grew up in an HOA for mobile homes where the board didn't upkeep roads, the park, the pool, and he screwed him over in selling. It's not insane, it's priest, it's maddening. And while that was a very
I mean, oh, that's ridiculous. Every now and again, you might have, I mean, God, it's not practical over anomalies, and that's what that is. Just because you have an anecdote, just because you have a personal example of a thing that happened, well, a guy I know, or whatever, or my dad, just because you have a personal story about a thing that happened to you this one time, that does not make this entire system based on your story practical. To think your story makes the HOA practical is insane.
popular comment, you also had some pushing back, like Chris, who said, it is not insane, it's practical. My dad's house was next to a junkyard crack den house, and it really screwed him over in selling his house. Everyone saw the neighbors coming down the road, and that was all it took for them to bail. We also had Insanity sharing grew up in an HOA for mobile homes where the board didn't upkeep roads, the park, the pool, or the public boat launch. Took my parents to court for refusing to pay fees, but the judge threw the case out when my parents brought photographic evidence of zero upkeep. Basically told the HOA it needed to do the upkeep instead of pocketing the fees. And there's really no shortage of anecdotal stories, right? My Lady Absinthe sharing. My friend bought a house with an HOA right before the pandemic, and he's now being evicted because there is a water leak problem causing sinkholes, and the city said the HOA has to pay for it, and the HOA doesn't have the money, even though they're charging over $300 a month and barely maintain anything. And here, you know, I will say I've had different experiences, right? Like where I live right now, knock on wood, the HOA has been fantastic, very hands-off. It seems like the things that need fixing get fixed, and no one's being like crazy nitpicky, but the rules and the guidelines seem to make the neighborhood look fantastic. But then in other places, like where I've set some family up, super over the top nitpicky. I mean, we've been trying to get a generator installed for far too long. You know, sometimes it feels like jumping through hoops for the sake of hoops, like a power thing. But luckily, none of my experiences are any of the numerous nightmares that were shared in those comments. So then also in the comments, we'll end on something lighter. And
Fuck
that is
HOAs. Fuck HOAs, man. Fuck HOAs. Look, okay, you want to make HOAs a thing that's okay for them to function. It's real easy. Limit their reach. Regulations. Got to regulate that shit. Make HOHs to where the only thing they can do is take care of upkeep and prevent things that would do harm to that upkeep.
all the conversation around that whole Concord failure. And a number of the comments left me wondering, you know, if they do try to bring this game back, could it actually be successful as a free-to-play? Or because it very much appeared that a lot of people never knew this game was a thing, like me. With Daniel saying, I never even heard of Concord until everyone started talking about what a major flop it was. Followed by, same, this video is the first I
saw
heard
a
of
couple
it.
of
Others
ads
also
for
saying
it.
that's surprising because they tried really hard. It was
I
a
saw a
feature at a
couple
few
of ads
games
for it.
conferences. The devs made waves, recalling everybody who had a valid criticism of it talentless freaks, which is probably not a great thing if true. I mean, so there is a world if you take a game that was previously talentless freaks, games conferences, the devs.
I saw a couple of YouTube commercials for it, or maybe Facebook commercials, but I saw a couple of ads before it came out, and my first initial thoughts were, hey, another one of these team shooter games in an already oversaturated market where only 1 out of 10 games lasts a year or two. And then my other reaction was, wow, they're not hiding the fact that, you know, their characters are derivative of all these different pop culture things. Like there being a character who's clearly a nod to Guardians of the Galaxy, a character who's clearly a nod to Halo in a way. There was that one character, the big bulky robot thing. As soon, you know, like, because my brain was already in that mode where I was looking for, what is this character a nod to? What is this character an homage to? And I felt like the big clunky robot looking thing, like I kind of felt like that was supposed to be like Big Daddy from BioShock in a way. But yeah.
Devs made waves, recalling everybody who had a valid criticism of it talentless freaks. $40, and granted, not that many people bought it. With this whole debacle, I mean, there is a possibility that
Now, it's not often we get brand new open world sandbox space games with seamless planetary transitions and no loading screens whatsoever, but that's exactly what. So yeah, picking up a weapon, there's a great selection here, from sniper rifles to shotguns to submachine guns. I've only got, well, not a lot of money left, so wanted to pick up the submachine gun as well as some ammo. And here's a quick look from the top of the refueling tower. Again, getting close to sunset here, but does look very nice. So the refueling tower that we're located at is relatively small in the grand scheme of things. Dotted elsewhere around the planet are full-on cities, and these are very big. I haven't visited one in the full game, but I did visit one in the demo I tried a while back, and here comes that lift taking me further up. Outside the refueling tower, outside the settlement, things get a little bit barren. Now, yeah, this is a little bit like the Wasteland, I guess, in Fallout. It's very, very big. You can just keep going, and as I hope I touched on the beginning of the video there. Yes, I did. There's no loading screens. Everything is absolutely seamless. So regardless of whether you're driving over the surface of the planet or just keep walking, or whether you go up into space, you'll never once encounter a transition or a loading screen. Now, these creatures, one of the first things you're going to have to attack, and they really do rush at you. They completely zerg you, and you'll get overwhelmed very, very fast. You can see there's a bit of that jankiness going on here that I mentioned early on. Personally speaking, I don't really have a problem with this. It's not a AAA game. I would have a problem with it in a full-on AAA release, but even with this jankiness, I do feel the game is a lot of fun, and that's just down to the nature of the way this has been put together. Not everyone is going to feel the same way about that. Some of you may not be too happy about it, so do keep that in mind if you're thinking about picking the title up. That said, the title will only released this week into early access on Steam, so it's still very early days. Now, sooner or later, you're going to want to head further out into the barren wastelands, and walking is just not going to cut it. Fortunately then, the game does come with some vehicles, and, well, some of these do look a little bit on the goofy side. The Pod Fury is perhaps one of the best early vehicles in terms of its appearance. That looks pretty standard, but these ones, yeah, I kind of hope these are just placeholders and that we get something a little bit better as time moves on, a little bit better, something a lot better, hopefully. So, nice and cheap and cheerful. The Pod Fury Yeah, this one got me very nicely across the desert. Took me a moment to work out how to power it up. You hop on and hold down the power key, in this case R. The vehicle powers up and floats a little bit into the air, and you're good to go. Now this vehicle is very nippy. It does move very fast, and that's great over flat surfaces, but it does get a little bit tricky over all of these rocks. I kept clipping them, sometimes flipping sideways, a couple of times flipping it right upside down as well. You have to get off and correct the vehicle. Sooner or later though, a little bit like the Amazon drop-offs, things you get in towns and shops. But yeah, obviously again,
to see the Omni shows. But anyway, yeah, every Tuesday night wrestling show.
I'm going to try out that. Let's try out the demo for the casting of Frank Stone. My controller was vibrating through that whole bit. That's all it has? Well. Virtual goods. Behavior. behavior. I get it. Neat. Okay, yeah. I don't think we want to do Ultra just yet. And before I start this, I gotta piss.